A very good afternoon to everybody. Happy International Clinical Trials Day. Thank you for taking the time and joining us this afternoon as we take you through very robust discussions around clinical trials and just celebrating achievements that the clinical trials industry has been able to achieve in these very torturous times of this COVID-19 pandemic. So today we celebrate everybody from the clinical research sites, investigators, the study coordinators, to the monitoring teams, the CRAs, the project managers, the logistics, because we do realize that to run a clinical trial and to be able to accomplish what we've been able to accomplish, it takes a lot of people, it takes a lot of stakeholders. So thank you for joining. We are here to celebrate you. You are the heroes. So this afternoon we have quite a packed agenda for you. We bring you a panel of experts within clinical trials. Becky and Dr. Aspinall will be taking you through these discussions. But before we start with the discussions, I think it is important as we celebrate what we've been able to achieve and as we celebrate the new future. It is important to just take a step back and look where we come from. And the person who will be taking us through this is Professor Opel Grief. Thank you, Prof, for joining us this afternoon. You are in very good hands. Prof Grief has been part of the clinical research industry for quite some years. He holds a bachelor's degree in medicine and surgery with postgrad qualifications in primary healthcare, pharmacology, pharmaceutical medicine, and also a doctor's degree in psychiatry. He comes joining us this afternoon from SiteSpace Africa. But before SiteSpace Africa, he's been the CEO in the early development and laboratory services, has been the president of global product developments, and he also serves in a lot of boards. So Prof, without further ado, can I give you this chance to just take us through where we come from as clinical research?
The Prof's connection is very bad. You can't hear, it's just breaking up all the way.
So I think we can take it up, Len, now. You know, I think what we can do is for everyone to maybe share their history of how they started when it came to the clinical trials, how they joined the industry. I mean, I will start, Prof. Burgess, I see you here. Thank you for joining. I see Dr. Sanet Aspinall, you have a lot of experience that is dating back to some years back. So as Prof tries to get in to connect again, maybe you can give us a brief history of how you started in the clinical trials industry. Prof. Burgess, to you.
Hello. Am I cut off now? Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
You want me to continue?
Yes, please continue. Yes.
Okay, let me just start then. As I say, I first heard about the CRO industry in 1986, and the company involved was BSLRs, which none of us know anymore. They've been bought by Covans many years ago. And if you go into history, what is interesting, outsourcing started in the 1940s and 50s from the pharmaceutical industry, specifically to Huntingdon and Charles River labs, where the preclinical services were outsourced to outside companies. Then after that, we had the thalidomide disaster. And up to that stage, the pharma industry just developed drugs and put it on the market. There was nothing really to control them. Until in 1960, when the FDA came into being, 1960. And for all of us in South Africa, 1965, Act 101 came into being. And we got regulation of drugs and drug distribution and development in South Africa. So that was a long time. Since then, not much really happened. They were still outsourcing. The next thing in the 70s that started was outsourcing data management and biostatistics worldwide. And in the early 70s, a few companies started like Quintiles with Dennis Gillings in 1971, and PPD as well. So they started outsourcing, and you know, a lot of the work was sent to outside companies to be done. If we then look at, you know, what else happened in drug development, and you know, I've been in drug development for 48 years in July of this year, and I always say it only means I've made more mistakes than any one of you will ever meet have done. I always remember what Prof. Peter Forbes said: drug development is not for sissies. It's a difficult game, and it's something you really have to get into and do well. So there was some more clinical development coming up in the 80s, where Quintiles came into being, and then Parexel and the other companies started doing full service CRO. Subsequent to that, phase one was outsourced, and a lot of phase one units were built across the world in China and Singapore and those places in America. So it really went to phase one studies. In the 20s, 25, Sanet will tell us, the SMO industry sort of started with site management organizations. I don't know, Sanel, when was it? 2005, somewhere around there.
Yeah,
And now in
2000.
the 20s, yeah. Now in the 20s, the new thing is decentralized clinical trials. Is coming, you know, has been a reality. There are companies in South Africa doing decentralized clinical trials, mainly from the nursing side, home care nursing companies doing that specifically. And I think in the future we'll see artificial intelligence and specifically machine learning will change the way we develop drugs significantly. If we all think of it, what do we do in clinical research? We all only do one thing. We measure change over time. That's all we do. Nothing more, nothing less than that. The more exactly you can measure the change over time, the less patients you will need and the less the cost will be for clinical trials. I was working at Roussel in the 80s. I worked for him for 10 years. I was in pharma industry for 13 years. And, you know, we've had quite a few studies. We launched 8 products in those 10 years and developed them. So it was a very productive time in for the pharmaceutical industry. So we came to the end of this period after 8 drug development and the launches, and Jill and I decided perhaps we should start a CRO. This thing that we heard about, BSLRs, we've outsourced an Andron, antiprostatic carcinoma drug, to BSLRs. So we decided to start a CRO in South Africa. We did so in December of 1990. That's quite a few years ago. Jill and I and 2 other farmers, Anita Lessing and Ria LaRue, started Clinifarm. And there was no local market at all. We had to get international work to get going. Luckily, we left Roussel with the pediatric development of cefpodoxime proxetil, or Oralox, as we all know it now. And we started with that as a project. What we've been fortunate to do is we've done 3 total drug developments in South Africa, from first time in man to FDA registration. And this is quite an achievement. If you think of India and China, from creation until today, none of those 2 countries, neither of them, has ever developed a drug from first time in man to FDA registration. So if you look at South Africa and our principal investigators and our physicians, we've already done 3 total developments from first time in man to FDA registration. The first drug that we did develop totally in South Africa is rifapentine, the last anti-TB antibiotic that was registered worldwide, but unfortunately not in South Africa. It's a pity, I always say. It's really our drug. Rifapentine belongs to South Africa. It was totally developed in South Africa. We did 740 patients, and we got it registered with the FDA, but not registered in South Africa yet. So that was an interesting study. The next one was triptorelin, which was an LHRH agonist that we also developed first time in man in South Africa. We did in Tim Noakes' unit, we did some studies in men. And we basically, from there onwards, did the full development in South Africa. The FDA appointed a urologist from America to oversee the studies, but all the patients came only from South Africa. I think the last one that we did in collaboration, at that time we were still part of Quintiles, was the malaria vaccine, which was a patient study in 16,000 patients, totally run from South Africa, Quintiles at that stage, and Sub-Saharan Africa, and eventually registered. So this is a tremendous achievement, and I don't think people know or realize what contributions South African physicians have made to drug development internationally. As I say, India and China have not even yet to develop a drug to FDA registration. So we've got tremendous expertise in this country. And, you know, we should really think of that. We always think of the heart transplant that Chris Barnard did. But the contribution South African physicians made to drug development is far more significant than what that can ever be. So that was really a fantastic achievement. From there onwards, basically, a lot of other CROs started in South Africa. Quintiles started the first, I think, in 1996, and then Parexel in 2000, Icon in 2002, Pharma Lam in 2006, and PPD in 2007. And many more. And I think today there are about, and I may have it wrong, about 20 CROs in operation in South Africa, participating in clinical trials all over the country. So this was really a tremendous achievement that we've had. The question is, what made us unique? And I'll see I'm getting to my time. What made the CRO? Why are we different? I think the most important thing is the quality and the experience of our physicians and our principal investigators. They are really excellent physicians. You know, if you think of experience, they've got patient loads that no other physician in the world has. When I lived in the States, I had to have a knee replacement. I went to do.
We've lost you, Prof.
That he's done 282 knee replacement up to that stage. And when I came back to me, Can you hear me now?
It's a bit better, Prof.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. Continue.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yes,
okay,
Prof.
There, back. Okay, what I wanted to say, it's the quality and experience of physicians and PIs in South Africa that's incomparable. I told you about the knee replacement, the guy 282 knee replacement.
Prof. Okay, I'll just, for now, let's just go through this video while we get Prof set up.
So good in South Africa.
Sorry, Prof, we'll have to play something in the meantime. Prof?
Can you hear me?
Okay, thanks, Vicky. Do we have Prof back? We are at the mercies of the connection gremlins. There are parts of South Africa that are currently going through a storm. I think Prof might be one of the unfortunate people today.
Yes, I think what we can do, maybe Barbara, if we can try to reach out to Prof, and we'll need to include this session again, because I think there's a lot of content that many of us are not aware of, and it's quite interesting. So, Prof, if you can hear us, we'll have to park the content for now and continue with the agenda. But thank you very much. We'll make sure that at our next meeting, we also put a slot for this.
No, definitely.
Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. I think he's still trying.
Okay.
Thank you so much, and apologies about that. But this is the new era we find ourselves in, right? Okay, but Prof, yeah, from what we got from that conversation, Prof, I think, and especially as young investigators and young people in clinical research, it is very evident that we stand in the shoulders of giants. So thank you, Prof, for that reflection on our history. And it's actually quite, and it's evident that there's still a lot of work to be done. When Prof speaks about the rifapentine, the drug that was developed in South Africa and still not registered in South Africa, we still have quite a journey to go. But it is comforting that we come from such rich history, and beyond that, we've been able to accomplish some outstanding achievements in this past year. So without further ado, please do give me an opportunity to introduce the second, actually the meat of our discussion today. So we do have two panel discussions that will be hosted by our Sacra chairperson, Vicky, and Dr. Espanil. Thank you, Doctor, for taking the time. The first panel discussion would be a conversation around what have been everybody's experiences in achieving enrollment, safety, retention, good quality data while delivering these at very high speed as the pandemic has evolved in the last 18 months. And then the second discussion would be specifically on what has been happening in the last few months with the rollout of the Sisonke trial, and what everybody's experience has been as they've had to pull out their sleeves and go beyond the call of duty to make sure that we have a solution and some controls over this pandemic. Like I've said, the hosts for these discussions are Dr. Sanet Espinal. Dr. Sanet is a clinical research specialist and consultant. She holds a PhD in virology. She's the founding director of Aiden Consulting, where they do business consulting, training, and some medical writing services. She was also the founder of the first private SMO in South Africa, that SMO being the Clinical Research Site Network, which was later acquired by Synexus UK. She sits in a lot of boards. She has experience spanning over 200 clinical studies, from early to late stage development studies. But she does not come alone this afternoon. She comes with Ms. Nyaleti Biki Mtombeni. Biki is our sitting Sacra chairperson. She also comes with quite extensive experience in clinical research, spending over 15 years. She's quite, if you know her, she is quite passionate about capacity building and advocacy in for clinical trials in South Africa. Beyond that, she's involved in different mentorship programs with different clinical research sites around the country. Vicky, Dr. Aspinall, without further ado, may I please pass the torch on to you as you take us through the different discussions today.
Thank you. Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone who is online. And thank you for joining us in this session that Sacra has organized on Clinical Trials Day. So we all know that scientists throughout the world have developed treatments and vaccines for the new coronavirus disease, which we all know as being COVID-19, in the shortest time in history of any development programs. And many of these vaccines, I think it's about 13 that have now been approved or have received authorization by the WHO and have been rolled out in some countries. In our country, 3 of the vaccines have been registered for emergency use or for Section 21 authorization. And 2 of them, the Pfizer vaccine and the J&J vaccine, are currently being used in the rollout for vaccination. The second phase of vaccination started in South Africa on the 17th of May. I think today we're in day 4. And the clinical trial professionals in this country have immensely contributed to where we are today, and most probably will continue as more COVID vaccines become available. So we want to make this afternoon very relevant and timely because we are still in the middle of this pandemic with some certainties and uncertainties. And we'll be talking a lot today about research and development of these vaccines, achieving safety, retention and quality, and about the ethics as well. And we're very fortunate this afternoon to have a panel of experts, really a 5-star lineup, I think, of heroes in clinical research. And we want to honor them also this afternoon, as well as other clinical trial professionals. So we're fortunate to have Professor Leslie Burgess, who we all know and wears many hats. She's a reviewer of CTC at Sacra. She's an investigator also at TRED, managing partner also at PAL Research. And she's contributed immensely to clinical research and have written chapters in textbooks, and is also instrumental in finalizing our SAGCP guidelines. We have other site investigators, Dr. Gill from the Masipuleli Research Center, Dr. Maselela, who is the PI at Sashaba on COVID-19 vaccine studies. We have Dr. Kasim, the PI at the Desmond Tutu Health Foundation, who was also one of the PIs on the Ensemble study and the Sazonki open label study. And then we have Mr. David Mashilu, who represents study coordinators and also patient recruitment at sites. We're fortunate also to have 2 international CROs represented here today by Sue Bailey, the Senior Director of Clinical Operations for Africa and Middle East, ensuring operational excellence at ICOVIA through their studies and also clinical monitoring activities. We have Greg Olivier, who is a vaccine project manager and also the lead project manager within PPD, ensuring that COVID-19 vaccines are successfully managed through all the R&D stages. And we have Catherine Lund from one of our local CROs, and will be talking to us today about some of the interesting aspects that she's been involved with during COVID-19 trials. And then Jailene Guest, who's representing the monitoring fraternity. And then we're also fortunate to have 2 ethics committees represented here. Welcome Professor Mark Blockman, the chair of the Faculty of Health Sciences, Human Research Ethics Committee at UCT. He's also a professor in internal medicine and also a specialist consultant in clinical pharmacology. Welcome. And then also to Marcel Haskins, the Managing Director of Pharma Ethics and also a member of the NHREC. And with these introductions, I will go straight now into some of the questions to the panel members. And hopefully we can kickstart this session. So I want to pose the first question to maybe 2 investigators, Dr. Maselela and Professor Burgess, maybe from the perspective of reviewing clinical trials or the COVID studies at CTC. And perhaps a study coordinator, Mr. Mashililu, can also talk to us about his experience. So when COVID-19 first hit the world, the scientific community was faced with the need to accelerate science outcome. And a key step in this process is really to do R&D development of your phase 1 through to phase 3. And we all know that it takes a long time, but we have today vaccines available in less than 12 months since the first lockdown was announced in the country. And these groundbreaking developments are really, they're very optimistic, and they offer hope to us. And through this scientific development that has taken place within our country as well as globally, where we've participated in some multinational trials, I want to ask, now that there's mass rollout of 2 of these vaccines, as a clinical trial professional, what is your inner feeling of knowing you have contributed to this, to really make this happen in a pandemic? So Leslie, maybe you can start.
Prof. Burgess is experiencing challenges.
Yeah.
So with the audio, maybe we can pass the question to
Dr. Maselena. Dr. Madu, would you like to start? Seeming that we can't get Leslie online now.
Thank you for the question. It is something that you strive for as a research PI, where you would want to obviously see something that you're working on actually being rolled out and saving lives. We are currently in a pandemic, and obviously we, like you said, there's naysayers out there who were saying that how can we develop a vaccine so fast, whereas we've seen other vaccines taking years to be developed. But I think most people are not aware of the technology that had been ongoing in the in the sidelines, where we were using new technologies to actually expedite these vaccines. So as a PI, working on vaccines that are currently being rolled out in a pandemic is a feeling that is indescribable, if I may say, because looking at history, looking back at the flu pandemic, we saw a whole lot of people dying there, about millions, 100 millions. But with this vaccine, the hope is there, where we are now slowing the rate of the pandemic, the spread of the pandemic, and you are seeing results, tangible results, whereby you are actually contributing to the betterment of society or the betterment of the human race in all, because this has affected the entire planet. It is not just countries like South Africa, it's the entire planet, the entire population. And having contributed to saving at least one life, that is immeasurable in my opinion. And it's kind of giving us hope and the zeal to strive and do more. So I think it's interesting times to live in, and obviously being part of this history, because this is history in the making, being part of this history is absolutely awesome. And I think I made the right choice in being a PI and choosing to be a clinical research practitioner, so to speak, because unfortunately, when we're at medical school, nobody tells us about this. When you talk about clinical trials, we kind of like don't have a grasp of what this entails. But being part of this is absolutely amazing. And like I said, it's jolted me into the right step and said, oh, okay, I made the right choice. I made the right decision. And obviously, I'm not only impacting one life, but millions or even billions, so to speak.
So thank you very much. We want to hear from David. What is your feeling, knowing as a study coordinator and recruiting patients at your site, how did you feel you've contributed to this?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Good afternoon to everyone. I think for me, I'm really excited about the future of clinical trials after having seen this. And the reason for that is that, before 2020, if you had to ask anyone, in terms of what the discussion topics were about when they went out on picnics, or whether they're having a braai or whether they're just sitting together. I can confidently tell you that they weren't talking about vaccines or anything of that nature. But today, it's a subject on everyone's lips, and not only individuals, but also we're talking about governments that are discussing vaccines, that are also promoting awareness about vaccines, as well as private entities that are not even in health promoting awareness. So I think COVID-19, yes, it came with a lot of negativity, but I think it has also created a solid foundation for other studies to come, because now people are aware about what it is that we do, and seeing lives being transformed is really amazing. But for me, I think the educational factor of it really blows me away, because it's topics that we were never discussing. I look at my daughter. I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she came to me. I recently got vaccinated. Anyway, so she comes to me and she asks me, "Daddy, did you get vaccinated with the B?" And I said, "No, yes, I actually did get vaccinated." And it stood out for me on 2 fronts. Number one, if children, that are that age are now talking vaccination, I'm really excited to see where this is going in the next 20 years, where it becomes a norm, where, we're removing all these stories about, this is what clinical trials is all about, where people actually see it as a norm, And the second thing that stood out is that my daughter was asking me about clinical trials and not about, vaccines, and not about ice creams and chocolate. So I'm grateful for that, and so is my pocket. But I'm really excited, and I'm seeing in terms of where things are going, and yeah, having to change lives. Doc actually mentioned it quite well. It's really life transforming to say, I played my part. Yes, people might not know my name in the next 50 or 100 years, but I know that, I did something, even if it was a small part in it. We transformed the world, and that for me is really something worth bragging about.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Now, I want to ask Dr. Gill, how different were the COVID vaccine studies from normal clinical studies? You can just briefly tell us, your experience of how different were they than other studies?
Yeah, so I think I've reflected on this, and I thought of 5 different ways that they were different. So first of all, I come from a background of being in HIV research, and we know that we've spent 30 years trying to develop an HIV vaccine. It's been so different, just the time period of COVID, within a year to have a vaccine, as opposed to all these other illnesses that have taken an average of about 50 years to develop a vaccine. It's just been so sort of interesting working so quickly. And I think a lot of people have asked us how it's even possible that it's happened so quickly. And I know from experience, it's just through cooperation. So that I also think has been so different about COVID research. I really feel like we have all just been cooperating with each other. I mean, I can say there are 5 J&J PIs in Cape Town. We have a WhatsApp group, and we are constantly on our WhatsApp group, troubleshooting. On the day we all started Ensemble, we were asking each other for help, and I've never had that on another study before. And I think some of that as well is because we just had to recruit such large numbers. We'd never ever been involved with studies, well, I haven't, where we've had to recruit so quickly and such such large numbers, and that required employing staff quickly, but we couldn't have the staff on for too long, like pharmacists, for example, because we didn't need them after we had vaccinated everybody. So there were a whole lot of logistical things that also have been very different. Yeah, and the other thing that was different for us was the kinds of people we were recruiting. For the first time, we had to recruit older people, and we were recruiting people with comorbidities, and those kinds of people. Just having people, having old people, and just navigating the trial site is different to our usual younger people. I think the other thing was also not creating super spreader events. So we were trying to find a prevention for this disease, and we didn't want to infect people when they came to our site. So we had to think very carefully about flow and about, the use of non-pharmaceutical interventions and making sure we had enough PPE and just making sure that our participants and our staff were safe while we were trying to work so quickly. And I think the last thing that's been very different for us in this COVID age is the use of technology, and how, for example, our participants were logging their AEs on an app for the first time, and also, what we had to do as a site to ensure that our participants were able to navigate their phones, had data, had airtime. And then just also how we interacted with the sponsor, that's also become a lot more technological. So I think those were some of the differences. I don't know whether Sheetal has anything to add.
Thank you very much. I think we've kind of like got a good idea now of how different these COVID trials were, as against the other clinical trials. Vicky, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Jill, for that summary. Mr. Masilo and Dr. Masilela, I think that was really great to share your perspective. I have one question that I would like to pose to Prof. Burgess and Dr. Kasim. So when you first implemented the COVID-19 protocol at your site, considering that COVID is a new disease, what were your thoughts? How did you navigate through that? There were a lot of talk around the stigma of COVID-19 and all these perspectives and myths. How did you navigate that as a scientist? Over to you, Prof. Burgess.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Okay, sorry for joining late. I've had problems with sound. Yeah, I think the whole thing we were actually discussing today, the whole thing with the COVID-19 trials has been a thing in itself. We heard today that our particular site had a very high, when they went back and did the unblinding of the screenings for the Ensemble 2 study, apparently our site had a very high positive, asymptomatic rate. And we were so focused on actually doing adequate PPE and that in our treatment COVIDs that we actually even forgot that there was so much asymptomatic COVID around. So I think it took a huge mind shift to work on this. I think the technology, as I mentioned, was a big difference here. I think even the politicization of COVID created problems for us that we've never had before in clinical trials. We've had patients almost forming unions against us about things like payment and when they're wanting their results unblinded, and actually for the first time ever, not at my site, but I was the national PI, and at other sites we've had at least 2 to 3 patients threatening to go to the press and do all sorts of things. So I mean, there's been a very different sort of mindset to these trials.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Burgess. And Dr. Kasim, your input in this?
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that already the COVID pandemic brought with it a sense of anxiety, and to top that, there was that added stigma and myths surrounding the COVID vaccine. So I think navigating these sort of trials in this time, and especially early on in the pandemic, you have to be confident and you have to trust your knowledge in the science, and you have to trust your experience. And the most important thing I found was also trusting our team, trusting that we could do this. We could adapt to the technology, we could adapt to the fast-paced recruitment, and in terms of allaying the fears around the vaccine, being a healthcare worker and having first-hand information and first-hand evidence-based information really helped. I think the technology, like Dr. Masilela said, we knew the technology. It's a known technology. We use the adenovirus platform for our ensemble study. So that really helped, knowing that this vaccine, we have used the platform before, and there was just a small change. It was easy to try and explain this to participants and to patients. And I think importantly is that your confidence as an investigator translates onto your participants. I think also in terms of ethical perspectives around it, I'm very reassured and comforted by the fact that we have a robust regulatory framework in South Africa. Our ethics committee is excellent, and they actually are. They're on our side, they're on our participant side. And like Catherine said as well, it was a collaborative effort to get these studies off the ground. Another thing I wanted to add is, as an investigator on these studies, along with the anxiety and that the pandemic brought with it, you feel a sense of urgency to get something working, to get a vaccine, a prevention, a sort of treatment off the ground. And I think that makes your confidence in implementing these trials even stronger. And that sense of urgency pushes you as an investigator to innovate, to work harder, and to try and get things implemented correctly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kassem and Prof. Burgess, for sharing that. And over to you, Dr. Aspinall.
Yeah, so we want to turn to ethics now and talk a little bit about ethics and safety. So I want to ask Professor Blockman and Marcel Haskins, what were the ethical challenges or the dilemmas in reviewing these COVID studies, and also in dealing with safety issues on new COVID vaccine technologies, these mRNA technologies, and the adenoviral vector vaccines, and some other new technologies that are still going to come, and also the atypical and rare events happening on some of these vaccines. How did you deal with all of this at your ethics committee? So maybe we can start with Professor Blockman.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, so the COVID space has been very interesting. There's been a requirement for rapid review of protocols, not only in the vaccine space, but in obviously the prophylaxis and therapeutic space as well. And that's obviously tested the requirements for how ethics committees navigate the space, which would be very unusual. And what we did nationally is organize an informal group of chairs of ethics committees to get together called RESCOP. And the idea was to share some ideas, some of the anxieties, and some of the thought processes around many of the studies and many of what was happening, to try and alleviate some of the anxieties that may occur during ethics committees deliberations. And so that was a very useful thing to do. And if you remember, we didn't have a National Health Research Ethics Council to guide us because they hadn't been appointed at that time. So we were left alone to do that. And so what this required was a flexibility of the ethics committees, a belief in the reviewers, a belief in each other in terms of the sharing of information, and understanding the urgency that vaccines in this particular case was required, and try to remember what we had learned from previous vaccine development and previous vaccine issues of how we could utilize that within our discussions. And it was very hard because the preliminary data, especially for safety, was not there. And so there was often a leap of faith and a requirement that we were hoping that reporting of adverse events would occur, which would help guide further safety discussions. The other issues were around informed consent, the therapeutic misconception. If you think of the anxiety around the pandemic, the requirement for prophylaxis, people seeing family members and themselves getting into trouble, us as ethics committee, your clinicians seeing people die within the hospitals, there was this huge pressure to actually be vaccinated. And the thought process was that could proper informed consent actually occur if somebody just wants to be vaccinated? And so those are the issues which require to be deliberated as well, and reliant on investigators to do due diligence. not just get people to volunteer without proper informed consent actually occurring. And then it was about trust and follow-up and making sure there was good collaboration. So in my ethics committee, we were asking for 2 weekly report backs to try and pick up urgent issues that may occur, regular collaboration to try and make sure that everything was on track. We can talk about the Sisonke later on, but maybe that's a good start, and Moselle can take over.
Yeah, thank you. Moselle, anything to add?
Hi, everyone. I think I can pretty much agree with everything that Professor Blockman said. All the issues they had, we definitely also encountered. And I can also say thank you to Professor Blockman for all the assistance he gave me. I think we spent a lot of time on emails and help out and what do you think and how do you think we should, deal with these things. So I want to start off by thanking him for his assistance. And then, yes, I mean, obviously similar issues we had. I think one good thing that came out of this is the collaboration that we've had between the ethics committees. I think there's a lot more collaboration now than there probably was in the past. And I think that will probably go, into the future with different types of research that will definitely help the whole research environment, the fact that the ethics committees can get together like this. Another challenge that I think a lot of the committees probably had, because with us, was the fact that we all of a sudden had to go all electronic. Ethics committees are very paper-based kind of organizations, and all of a sudden everything had to happen electronically because no one could, could go to the office and sign documents, and everybody wants a signed document, and we all had to learn how to do electronic signatures and things like that. So that also changed, I think, the way maybe that ethics committees will work in future, in the sense that they now realize how important it is to actually be able to access their members electronically, to get documents submitted to them electronically. So that's definitely changed the whole the way. Another thing that also deals with electronics, but also consent. Yes, we've discussed things like therapeutic misconception. People want to go for vaccines, so hoping it's going to cure them. They don't always understand that we're working with research here, and it's not necessarily going to benefit an individual, but we're looking at benefit of society as a whole. We were also then confronted with the concept of electronic informed consent, which is also something that we haven't really dealt with in the past. And we as committee members had to ask questions and learn how this works. And is someone still going to get a piece of paper afterwards? Is the signature still actually going to be on a document, or, is it just going to be a nod of the head and things? So as you can see, there was a lot of challenges specifically around technology. And then the timelines, I think we all battled, because obviously the expedited review, I think if you open an email and you see the heading expedited review, you wanted to run away, because we tried to do as much in as little time as possible. There was a lot of pressure. There was pressure from sponsors, there was pressure from CROs, there was pressure from CRAs, there was pressure from investigators. For us to still do a good job under all this pressure, sometimes, it was a little bit difficult. But I think we've all learned a lot of lessons, and I'm hoping that whatever we've managed to do now, we'll be able to take with us to the future. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you. Yeah, it seems like you were at some stage really overwhelmed, but thank you a lot, Marcel, for that. I have one more question perhaps that I would like to pose to Professor Blockman, and that really deals with placebo-controlled studies. We all are aware that the studies that have been conducted to date, they were placebo-controlled. Not sure how feasible that is going forward, but under conditions of vaccine scarcity, what are the ethical reasons, perhaps conflicting with offering vaccine to all participants in the placebo group, especially if one looks at health equity and giving vaccine to people not being prioritized for vaccines at this stage?
Bosh. So the placebo control, so the placebo controls, so it was a little bit easier initially, and this was obviously a very important space to keep on analyzing and seeing where things were going. And as more data was being established, the role of placebo was kind of diminishing as we were understanding that therapy was working, and we could define or try and define what we meant by working and what those effect sizes really are. But initially, I think that the placebo control studies were appropriate. I think that we didn't know enough about vaccine efficacy. Some of the preclinical work was expedited, and so the safety issues and certainly the efficacy issues were not well elucidated. And so it was important to make sure there was a distinguishness between placebo as well as vaccine. And remember that if you look at some of the studies, the event rates were very low, and so that's often been a criticism in its own right in terms of the actual studies and what those actual studies really mean, and that's maybe not important for this discussion at this moment in time. I can certainly say that we've took a stance on one of the studies that was put in front of us. Recently, at the end of 2020, we were asked to review a study which was placebo-controlled, and we in fact rejected that, and we suggested that standard of care at that time was a vaccine, and that placebo-controlled study, especially in high-risk populations, was not acceptable, and we in fact rejected that study. So at the moment, our ethics committee is going to be very hard pressed to make a different decision around equipoise. Is there true equipoise at the moment? What is standard of care? We need to be very careful. There's a push now to suggest, as you've suggested yourself, that because the vaccines aren't available to everybody, that a placebo-controlled study could be viable because the standard of care in South Africa is no vaccine. We need to be very careful about that. And I'll take you back to the AZT studies, which were done many years ago, and South Africa learned a very nasty lesson when they accepted the fact that standard of care was no therapy, and then decided to use a different dose of AZT, which was obviously not acceptable and made people more vulnerable. And we must remember there's a participant there that is vulnerable already. We've heard how anxious everybody is and how many people want to be vaccinated. And so there's a lot of discussions that need to happen. Community engagement, who's the true community, the flexibility of the ethics committees to rediscuss, should there be a placebo-controlled vaccine study in 2021, May or June or July, as we move into the third wave. It's a very hard discussion, and I'm sure we're going to have that quite soon.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you very much. Over to you, Vicky.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Blockman, for giving us another topic for maybe our next webinar. But that is very interesting what you're sharing. It's really a challenging time. I would like to bring in the context of the monitor and the clinical research organization. On the call, we have PPD, and we do have Sue Bailey representing IQVIA. I would like to also note that they will be speaking on their personal capacity, so they're not speaking under the company's capacity, and I think we need to be very clear of that what they are sharing is their personal views, not necessarily the views of the company. So I will bring in here Jaylin Guest is also joining us. Hi, Jaylin, representing the monitoring team. So the monitors are also the heroes of clinical research. I would like to understand from you, how did you operationalize the work around COVID-19 vaccine? How did you have to adjust to your monitoring schedule, the traveling, and how did you contribute as a monitor to the data that we actually ended up acquiring? So this is directed to you, and I think Mr. Greg to at least also provide some content. Also, Sue Bailey on delivering of quality data during COVID pandemic.
Hi everyone, and thanks. Yeah, to start off the discussion from a monitor's point of view, when we did go into lockdown, we could not travel, and some of my sites are not local anyway, so they had to put a halt on the recruitment. So for my one study, they had not started recruiting yet, so luckily, it was just a recruitment for a whole thing of the recruitment for a few months before starting it up later. But another study, our COVID trial, when we started that, yes, I mean, everything had to change. Couldn't go to site, so we had to do our pre-trial assessment visits and our site initiation visits virtually. So that is different. We're used to going to site and having to view the facilities and, you know, seeing the processes on site. So how we adapted is the site would have to send photos. And it's not even a site that we knew because the site had moved buildings. So it was a brand new building. So they sent us a floor plan and photos, and we had a virtual meeting where they walked us through the floor plan and the photos. And it worked well. We could still verify, okay, the doors are locked, the cabinets where things are stored. So I think we adapted well with that. With knowing that it's a COVID trial and wanting to mitigate the spread, so not being in the middle of a study, but preempting not being able to go to site and wanting to deal with paper, we basically tried to go fully electronic and having electronic source. It is limited to, for example, lab reports where investigators have to add notes of it being clinically significant or not. Your originals, we were limited to a certain extent, but most of it can be monitored remotely. So working on a system, and this is new, there's definitely room for improvement when it comes to electronic source on the setup and how it's being monitored. But we are working with the vendor and we've provided feedback on how they can maybe try and improve that in future. And the e-consenting, of course, which is new, but I think it's the feedback we've gotten from the site, from what they've asked patients, from the site to the monitors, we've all had a good experience with the electronic consenting. Yeah, there's a lot more to think about when everything's electronic, and the logistics when it comes to labs. The patients, they don't have site visits, it's all home visits, telephonic, but they need to have swabs and bloods taken. So we have the labs going to their homes and doing home visits, and just the logistics with, I mean, IP, they didn't come to site to collect IP. So once they are COVID positive and we have to send them medication, it gets delivered via courier and they have to have a phone call and a checklist to make sure everything is there. And so their IP counseling is even remote. It was just a lot that changed and we went through a lot of teething problems. But yeah, it's just amazing how one can adapt. I think other trials that were midway, I think that was a lot more difficult. Now, I wasn't on too many other studies, but from what I know from the other CRAs, all the recruitment and stuff was just halted. And I'm not sure how they dealt with follow-up visits, but yeah, that was my experience with the visits that I had during lockdown.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I mean, I was also involved in one of the studies that were ongoing at that current moment, and at that moment, and I was working across 5 different countries. It was interesting to see how the way the implementation of what they call business continuity plan happened. And it had to be country specific, it had to be site specific. It was so dynamic. It was the most stressful time of my life. And what we know as monitors in clinical trials is that there is timelines and the timelines are very strict. So I will bring in now Sue Bailey just to talk around the timelines. How did you manage when you had to also come through the database log over that time? What kind of business continuity plan or measures were put in just to navigate during that time?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly was, or has been challenging, but probably for us, the most fulfilling work we've had, you know, the chance to really show the value of clinical trials and the positive impact of what we can do. And certainly the first time that friends and family have understood what I'm involved in. So in terms of the timelines, I mean, we had to take, there was a lot of uncertainty. It was, you know, a lot of people experiencing different things in both personal and professional capacities. So we really, disruption, we just had to calmly kind of sit down and evaluate at a per protocol, per country, per site, and actually to a patient level. So working closely in collaboration with the sites to enable patient follow-up. I mean, we just had to make sure that we were taking the appropriate mitigation strategies to ensure patient safety. Whether that was, you know, supporting, enabling home health visits, adjusting the lab strategy so that we could get more local lab assessments, and then obviously, you know, making sure we were following the latest regulatory guidances that were coming out, and as well then at a protocol level if there were any adjustments that need to be made. So it was managed. The business continuity plans that you referenced, I mean, at all different aspects, and just really that collaboration and cooperation was absolutely critical to make it a success. From our perspective, we still managed to deliver what we needed to deliver in those timelines, and certainly, you know, feel that it was difficult, but together we achieved what we needed to.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. And I mean, I can also bring in here Ms. Catherine Land, because I think OnQ also played a very key role when it came to business continuity and home care nursing. So I will appreciate maybe if you can also give us some input to show how ready is South Africa when it comes to home care nursing and how you actually navigated that challenge during this time.
Vicky, so this was very interesting for our company. It took me back because this was basically the first work I ever did as a monitor in 1995. I went to patients' homes. I was a pediatric nurse at the time, giving them RSV vaccines. So in some ways, I felt like we hadn't really moved forward. But OnQ's been doing some home care nursing for about 3 or 4 years now in a very low-key capacity. So we didn't actually pay a lot of attention to it in terms of how it'd be structured and all the constructs around it until COVID came. So we had a client who then approached us sort of about September, October last year, and said for the ensemble studies, can we please find them 80 nurses by next week, basically. So that was the extent of the first sentences. And the world behind that, we had no idea what that looked like. So basically what this was looking at is to try and offer nursing support. So nurses to go to participants' home with COVID positive symptoms for some pre-described visits during the studies. So the service was offered to various sites. Some took it up, some didn't, for various reasons. So I think on balance, it is different for us, very different. So from our point of view, what we have to consider, so we had to onboard nurses. So then there's all the HR processes, huge training, a lot of different platforms. Those of you who have been involved in J&J know very well the amount of technologies used was quite overwhelming certainly to ourselves, and can imagine poor nurses who've never heard of clinical research. GCP training, then all the legal things. Do we have travel insurance, malpractice insurance, all those kind of things, our processes, SOPs, proof of registration. So those kind of things. And then for COVID itself, PPE. I mean, my office as it's full has like boxes of PPE that we had to give to nurses. So they basically had to be kitted out with their own little clinic, if you like, to travel. So every nurse, we had packed PPE for them, and they had a plan to dispose of their sharps. They had a centrifuge for Ensemble 2, bovinometer, oximeter training, how to use those things. And then also how to gather the data themselves from the participants on their cell phone. And we've all got those questions we ask, is this platform validated? It's just a random cell phone. So these are things, again, like I think some of us have expressed on the call, that we are cause some discomfort, right? So you needed to kind of like, okay, let's trust the process. This is just new. This is just where we are. And we have to reach some of these obstacles, which I think we haven't still quite got to as well. So I think on balance, it was some form of support to sites. There was, I think, a lot of and I would understand from listening to some of the science staff on the call today, I think your capacity was overwhelming. So for us to arrive, and you know how documentation orientated we are, this was next level. So now we have to have so much more training and things. I think it was just like, whoa, I have to get so many participants on every day. But going forward, I think it is a real support and a real service that we could offer as clinical research. And I think globally, it's people are quite used to it. Less so perhaps in here as well. For our company personally, we enjoy the fact that we've now been exposed and trained to 40, 50 new possible researchers around our country that we can maybe upskill to possibly have study coordinator or CRA opportunities along the way. So we viewed it as that as well, to broaden our country base of people to be able to be exposed to clinical research in general.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that leads us to the next topic, which is the digitalized clinical trials. And over to you, Dr. Aspinall.
Yeah, I think that COVID really accelerated the shift to patient model, and really, as Professor Greef was saying, we're going to see a lot of decentralization of clinical trial activity and healthcare setting, as just been explained by Catherine. So I want to ask maybe Dr. Gill, your perspective on what were the lessons learned, and how did your participants and even your staff manage the technology, especially in the elderly population?
Yeah, so that's been quite challenging for us. And one of the things that we've actually done at our site is we've employed a totally new kind of person that supports participants to help them fill out their diaries, because we were just going crazy with participants either not doing it or locking themselves out, or just and it was quite difficult for them to do that. So we've actually now employed somebody who just helps participants navigate the digital stuff. And we actually also, in the same way, struggling a little bit with our staff. There's lots of online trainings, and just I think we had to learn about 15 new websites with this study. So we've also, our study coordinators also had to become like an IT support specialist. So yeah, definitely, it's definitely been quite a thing for us. And one of the things was trying to explain to our HR department and to UCT what we actually wanted from this person we were going to employ. It was such a new job. We've just never ever had that kind of job at our site before. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think the technology has really been challenging on these studies. I want to move on because I think our time is getting short. Can we just talk a little bit about recruitment? Maybe Dr. Masalela can tell us a bit about what strategies were employed at your site to ensure recruitment targets. And did COVID-19 increase clinical trial awareness amongst the trial participants and the population in your community?
Well, yes, Dr. Aspinall. We did employ different strategies and actually in recruiting for this study. What I can say is that we involved the community at large and made them aware that we are testing a vaccine that will probably benefit the entire community. So that was one of the draw cards that actually assisted us in getting the population that we're looking for, especially with the older population in some of the studies that we were looking for, the participants we were looking for. And that helped a great deal because we then found some participants would just come up to the sites and say, we heard from your outreach, your community outreach team, that you're looking for participants to actually enroll in one of your studies, and they would inquire more. And obviously that helps sensitize the community with regards to the fact that COVID is real, and it is a national emergency or a pandemic that's ongoing. And obviously we do want to roll out a vaccine that's going to work and actually prevent more people from getting this virus. So it did help. And unfortunately, with the lockdown, because you can't go out and have large gatherings, that did pose a challenge for us. But we then had to rope in our community members, community leaders that actually assisted in getting the type of people we're looking for our participants to enroll in the study.
And how did you deal with things if a participant comes back to you and says, look, my mother thinks you're giving me 5G? How did you deal with that?
I think what we were seeing there is a whole lot of misinformation. The one thing that you need to do is just be honest and win people over by showing them that this is more science. It's not speculation where we are now saying that the cell phones that they have that have 5G are giving them COVID. We just were honest, upfront, and simple. Try to explain in layman's language what we know as, I think, simplifying what your message across with regards to the questions they have and the information that you are giving, because we tend to try and explain things at the higher level. What actually helped as well was that we then had to translate all our information into the local language, which is Tswana, and that made it easier for people to understand. And that helped in allaying a whole lot of these misconceptions that we've been seeing surrounding or pertaining to the vaccines and the 5G, as you rightfully said.
Yeah.
So that helped a great deal, whereby we then had to translate all the information into local languages, which helped a great deal in actually having the participants or the entire community buy in into what we're trying to do.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I think there's been a lot of discussion and talk into, balancing science and perceptions and myths in terms of the COVID vaccines. Over to you, Becky. Maybe we can move on to operations. And I think we've got about 10 minutes left before we have to end this session.
Okay, I wanted to ask one question before operations. Maybe we can be very quick, and I'll direct it maybe to Prof. Burgess and Mr. Greg from PPD. With regard to diversity of clinical trials, what is your view on the role of South Africa to contributing to diversity of clinical trials?
Shall I start? Yeah, look, I think it has been an interesting thing, and the diversity here is going far further than our normal definition. Just the mere fact that we're having all these different variations, and we're starting to even just see trials coming up now, the new vaccine trials, which are being honed in on the certain different variations and the certain South African sort of sort of like characteristics. I think this probably the COVID vaccine trials more than anything has actually shown that we definitely can control. We are contributing a lot in terms of diversity.
Thank you very much. And Mr.
Yeah, I can
Greg,
maybe build on from that. Yeah, so I was part of some of the big trials last year that got to emergency use authorization. But what I must say, in terms of what South Africa can contribute, is just really how to reach out to communities. Seeing how trials are done this side compared to what I've been involved in the past, I think South African community outreach is far superior. And maybe just some background. So if you look at the two studies that got EUA last year, they They enrolled about 70,000 participants, and they ended up with 30% non-white, 70% white, which is quite close to the demographic. So in the US, you're looking at about 40% non-white versus 60% white. And I must say, I think that will be the benchmark for studies moving forward. And it took a tremendous amount of effort to even reach the 30%. I mean, maybe, and I know the time is running out, but I can just highlight two things. So it of course started with site selection. So we looked at various epi models. We made sure we got the sites in the right area. I mean, for the one particular study, we reached out to about 300 sites in terms of feasibility, and we probably got about 3,000 phone calls from sites absolutely desperate to get in on the study. I've never seen anything like that. And we settled on about 100 sites, and we really made sure that they were in the right area in terms of epi trending and in terms of the community that they could outreach or that they could reach out to. What we then also did, and then I'm talking about the US studies really, and I think South Africa could perhaps learn from that, is we really had almost weekly investigator meetings where we spoke about the numbers, we spoke about the trending, and we had, you know, it was quite a privilege to be part of seeing the full US machine sort of wake up. So we had Dr. Fauci and Dr. Adams, the Surgeon General, speak to us on a number of occasions, and really just push diversity, which was important for the study. And again, I think what we reached in terms of 30%, 70% is going to be the future benchmark. We use various subject portals. So we use the NIH portal to attract subjects. So there was a lot of, I'd say, public-private sector interaction and really working together for a common cause. There was some site outreach, but again, I think this is what South Africa is really good at. I remember some of the CIBs or the community, I forget the word now, the community outreach branches, CIBs, some of the NIH people in South Africa that I've seen is far superior to what I've seen in the US. The media was quite involved, and then we had a lot of support from the IRBs as well. So we had the material in Spanish and English predominantly, and the IRBs or ethics committees were approving these in a matter of minutes. Again, it's a privilege to be part of the US machine. For example, when we went to open label, we got approval for the open label, which was a major operational shift. So we got approval on the 24th of December, and we then implemented it on the 28th of December. But the IRBs, maybe to bring it back to the topic, really supported our push to getting diversity out there in terms of getting that patient material or the subject recruitment material approved. But I mean, having my foot on both sides of the two continents, I think South Africa should definitely not stand back in any regard to what any other country can do. And that's I try to keep it within the 10 minutes, Vicky.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think, I mean, there's just so much content that we would like to cover, and obviously time is not on our side. We had to involve the other panel on Sonke, and we need to move by 12:30. But maybe, Dr. Aspinall, if we can agree to go to maybe to move to the two last questions. But I will start with Sue Bailey to give us some content. I'm going to pick on her. Reason being that, I mean, there's a growth in the CRO market, and the CRO market is like sort of an unknown market in South Africa. And you being here in South Africa, what do you think is the perspective? How can you maybe give some background on how the CRO market contributes into the economy of South Africa?
Thanks for picking on me. No problem. So, I mean, I guess, as Prof. Cruyff mentioned, I mean, there's been outsourcing when the CRO started. I mean, Quintiles was over 3 years in this market, and now obviously we're IQVIA. So I think that trend has continued over a long period, and I continue to see that happening. From an economic contribution to the South African market, certainly, you know, we believe we've got a very good value proposition. from a country perspective, so many of the things we've discussed today, from a scientific community, the engagement of our sites, actually for many of our COVID studies, we had such a huge peak in monitoring demand that we have had foreign CRAs come to the country to support us. And all of them, it's been unanimous how they've remarked on the engagement of our investigators and our site staff. They've never actually worked in that kind of environment with such collaboration. So I think, you know, we try and give as much marketing access about our sites and our capabilities internally, and leverage that against our within our global organization to bring work to South Africa. You know, we're also known for having a very stringent but effective regulatory and ethics framework. And obviously, you know, the diversity question earlier, we are a diverse population with diverse genomics, and so I think our relevance is really increasing. We continue to communicate these messages globally with new sponsors, with internally within our organisation. So I do see us contributing to the economy. We have been able to provide a lot of new entrants to the CRA world, CRO world in the last year, and it's a privilege to be part of that. Really reminded of the caliber of people we have in South Africa, and so yeah, I mean, I think there's potential to grow that much further. I think, you know, together CROs, pharma and the whole industry, we could make more of that, certainly, but we have made a pretty good contribution today. I think also just within our organisation, you know, South Africa is seen as a prime hub for offshoring type of roles as well. Again, given our ability to interact well globally and time zone communication, all of that, so we continue to grow our teams, both delivering local work as well as supporting global delivery within South Africa. So we have a lot of support, and we are recognised as a destination, but certainly there's a lot more potential. And I think COVID has helped put us back on the map more consistently, and we're seeing as well the work coming through, not only COVID vaccine and treatment related work, but across a diverse portfolio of indications. Again, a big interest in South Africa, from what I'm seeing.
Good. Thank you, Sue. So I just want to, maybe I think we'll have time for one more question. I want to ask Prof. Burgess, what are some of the regulatory standards that you believe may need revision based on the lessons learned now from developing these vaccines in such a short time?
Sure. I think look, first of all, I think the Sacra and the CTC have been amazing in actually challenging and reaching up to the standards to do with the COVID trials. Being a member, I can say that I got very little sleep, especially in the first few weeks of it. But I think at the end of the day, they have really, you know, come through with it. I think it did show there have been incredible strengths and incredible weaknesses. The investigators and the sponsors, there were a lot of investigators and sponsors who came out with just the most superb presentations. A lot of the industry, unfortunately, also looked this as a way to try and sneak through things because it was quick. They didn't have to have all the documentation available, etc. And we did have a fair amount of pretty shoddy sort of stuff. I think we've actually shown that we can pull together, and I think it's going to I think almost backfire and create a problem for Sacra and the CTC in the long run, and that they're going to say to them, well, we could do it before we can carry on doing it. Yeah, it's I think it's you know, it's definitely identified what are the important aspects. You know, the sort of thing of having 6 monthly progress reports were just not something that were even feasible in these COVID trials where we had limited information. So the introduction of 2 weekly COVID, these progress reports was, we had no other way to actually do it but, you know, create this sort of obviously put a lot of stress on the committee. I think we have learned a lot as a committee. And I think we're learning every day. I think that the challenges we're now going to have, and Prof. Blockman did allude to it, is how we are going to go forward with vaccine trials henceforth. Okay, we've the two different sort of ways of thinking. The sort of thinking there that sort of says that, well, under 60s aren't yet eligible for trials, so let's include them. And we've got the other sort of aspect that says, well, this is still not standard of care. So I think this is going to be our next challenge we're going to deal with, and we are already starting to see it. And I think we've all learned that adaptation has been a big thing here. We go in with one preconception, and after a meeting and after chatting about things, we come up with something totally different. And 6 weeks later, we've got new information, and we almost go on like a 360 or 180 sort of like degree tangent in our decisions. So yeah, it hasn't been easy, but I think that we've really shown our mettle, and that we are up to the best of it when we come to the regulatory side.
Yeah, so thank you, Leslie. So I think it's time for me to close this session, and I think we've seen over the past months and today that the impossible is not impossible, really. And as a country, we've done a huge amount to find a way out of this pandemic. And I really think it's the clinical trial professionals that has been the shining light amongst all of this, and will continue to shine the light for South Africa. And thank you everyone who stayed with us during this session, and thank you very much for each and every one that has served on this panel this afternoon. Thank you for your wisdom and insight into this pandemic and COVID-19. Thank you very much. Over to you, Becky or Precious.
Just maybe as a note, as our panel that was involved in the last discussion leaves, the rest of the attendees can stay for the second discussion.
Yeah.
Okay, over to you, Vicky.
Yes.
Merck Research Incorporated is a New York-based clinical trials organization with a global network of high-quality clinical research partner sites. We are pathfinders to enrollment and quality studies, continuously changing every touch point, making us your vital connection in global clinical trials. Through innovation and technology, we consistently deliver amongst the highest number of participants, representing a broad spectrum of racial, gender, geographical, age, and genetic diversity in the shortest possible time, while delivering high-quality results and participant care. Merck's services include business development, accelerated startup timelines, operational compliance, recruitment, quality data, and analytical real-time learning with quick implementation of findings. Our time-saving centralized hub ensures optimized turnaround delivery for study feasibility, budgeting, and regulatory compliance. We understand your desire to cross the finishing line first, being first to market and achieving patent approval while optimizing your expenditure. Therefore, we are your vital connection in the chain which can propel you ahead of your competitors. With our tried and tested business, innovative and industry-first development, our project management models, and our hands-on experienced executive committee, we are confident we will exceed your expectations, as we repeatedly have been achieving. We've proudly been recognized by our industry, receiving the SPRIA Award in 2015 and 2019 for patient site recruitment innovation. So, when you're next searching for a partner in your clinical study, contact Merck Research Incorporated via info@merckresearch.com or visit merckresearch.com. We are your vital connection in global clinical trials.
Yes, thank you very much. Merck is our main sponsor. Together with BioCare, they've been sponsoring Sacra's operation. So hence today they are featured like this in our program. We do have other sponsors you will have seen in our adverts, which includes Trade Research. It also includes BARC. So if you would like to partner with Sacra for this kind of content to continue in our country, do contact us and always email Barbara at admin@sacraza.com. So thank you very much. I would like to see if our next panelists have already joined us. If possible, I would like to ask them to turn on their cameras as I start with the introduction. So I would like to introduce the next panel. We are going to talk about going beyond the call of duty in the rollout of COVID-19 vaccine, the phase 3B clinical trial. We are very fortunate today to have our distinguished panel from the leadership of the Sisonke phase 3B rollout study. The Sisonke phase 3B study was done in collaboration with the National Department of Health, the South African Medical Research Council, Desmond Tutu Health Foundation, Caprisa, Johnson & Johnson, and above all, our clinical research professional and our clinical research sites, BioCare, and other organizations and institutions. The project was introduced at a very important time in South Africa. We remember what happened during that time when we found out about the AstraZeneca vaccine and the level of efficacy towards the variant that was found in South Africa. And it was just at the key time when the country saw the opportunity and the government made pathways and together with the MRC to bring the phase 3B clinical trial study in South Africa in partnership with J&J. So what is much more important, what is much more valuable for today's discussion is the fact that this was done also partnered with clinical research centers. So the whole collaboration used and leveraged the already set up research sites that participated in the ensemble study. This was a great collaborative undertaking, and it had a lot of operational dynamics. And I would like to welcome the distinguished Sisonke management team that made everything possible. I mean, before I even go ahead and introduce every one of them, I think it's, for me, I just want to say you have done quite well for us. You've done really well for the country. Firstly, it's Prof. Glenda Gray, who's the president.
Can you see me? I'm not sure if you can see me. Are you? Am I visible?
No. No.
Why? Okay. I'm going to go into my computer. Okay, I'm on my laptop. So I'll try and show myself.
Okay, but I'll continue now with the introduction. That was Professor Glenda Gray, who's the first president and the CEO of the South African Medical Research Council. She is also the chair of the research committee on COVID-19, which brought together scientific evidence and experience to the Minister of Health and the National Coronavirus Command Council. She spearheads the South African medical research funding broadly and also for COVID-19. I also would like to introduce to you Prof. Linda Gail Becker. She's a physician, scientist, and an infectious disease specialist. Her research interests include programmatic and action research around antiretroviral rollout and TB integration, prevention of HIV in women, youth, and MSM. She has led numerous investigator-driven studies in HIV treatment, prevention, and tuberculosis. She's the past president of the International AIDS Society. Together, they will be joined by Miss Fatima Mayat. Miss Fatima Mayat is very key to our discussion today because she's the director in the operations and strategic development at the PHRU, which is the perinatal HIV research unit. And It wouldn't be complete if we don't have Ms. Jacqueline Odiombo, who's the HVN Co-VPN Africa program. She currently serves in an integrative role, providing technical and strategic and analytical support with the HVTN Co-VPN Africa program. She has been an integral part of the Sisonke team, implementation and oversight, including the pharmaceutical affairs. And our very own, who is also a Sacra Exco, Mr. Leonard Lazarus. He is the regional director at BioCare Africa and India, he's the regional director of the BioCare Africa and India. I mean, what is very important today to have included Mr. Leonard Lazarus is the fact that he was part of the team that led the distribution and the logistical aspect of bringing and distributing the vaccine into South Africa. He managed to bring together the 80,000 doses that were needed for our Sisonke project. I mean, we have really managed to secure the best today, and we celebrate you, our Sisonke management team, because if it wasn't for you, we would have only started having the vaccine introduced probably in South Africa on the 17th of May. But because of scientific research and development and the knowledge that you carry and your expertise, and also working with the research sites that are very important, you managed to go through what we call a phase 3B clinical trial. I will start by asking a question to you, Prof. Linda Gale Becker. I don't see Prof. Glenda Gray yet, but I will direct this question to you. What are phase 3B clinical trials in your view? Thank you. I think you're muted. Thank you.
You're still on mute, LGB.
Oopsie. I think it's the 5G. I think it's trying to
just next to your name, RGB, on the top next to your name is a red arrow. If you click it, you'll see the mute sign.
Let me see if she's muted. Barbara and Melo, are you able to?
Let me unmute her. Let me just unmute her. Okay.
I've unmuted her.
Okay.
But she's back onto mute. I don't know. I think she needs to unmute from her side. I've just unmuted her now, but it shows that she's still muted.
This has given us time also for Prof. Glenda Gray to connect.
To join.
Okay.
She says attendee is self-muted and is muted by the organizer. So maybe she must try to.
It's because I've just unmuted her. I've unmuted her now. It's on now. It's
there you
green
are.
now.
How's that? How's that?
That's perfect.
Perfect.
Okay, now do we have a webcam is the next story. Anyway, let me speak at least. I promise you we're much better at running clinical trials. But the bottom line is, you know, let me say the following. First of all, yes, go clinical trials. I think this was the opportunity that presented itself. So quickly, what is a 3B? Well, it occurs after a phase 3 efficacy trial. And it says, let's move into real world sort of scenario, as it were. So out of the typical clinical trial experience, it often is open label because you've already shown that the product has efficacy and you now want to see it in action, you know, once it's kind of rolled out in the way that it's going to be used. So it gives the opportunity to extend safety. And it gives you an opportunity to look at effectiveness. In other words, is this product doing what you hoped it would do when it's rolled out in a real world environment? So that's exactly what we did with Sisonke. Was we went to the vaccine centers as they exist even today in the national rollout. We as researchers partnered with them. We handed out the vaccines in to eligible participants, and we are asking the question now, do we see the effectiveness that we hope to see and that we saw in the phase 3? Does it actually live out? And then, of course, we are following up with safety, which is really critical. So thanks, Becky. I'll work on showing myself now.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and ask Prof. Glenda Gray the first question. What were the key drivers to consider the Sisonke program as a phase 3B study and also for South Africa? Oh my God.
I'm having a bad day today. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, that's
okay. I don't know. I'm having my computer crashed as I was trying to show myself. Tells you something. So we were in a situation where about 4 days. So let's go back to about the 27th of January. On the 27th of January, we had evidence that the Ensemble 1 study worked and that the vaccine was, around was efficacious in our region. And so we had a vaccine that the phase 3 had shown was working. And at that stage, there was no EUA application because the results had just come out. And just fast forward, the following Monday, the AstraZeneca vaccines arrived in South Africa, and we knew that they weren't efficacious or had minimal efficacy against our variant. And so we had a situation where we had a product that worked, but we had no registration in any other region in the world. And so we wanted to be able to rapidly implement our clinical research findings into practice. And the only way we could do it between the period of knowing your study works and you have EUA registration or commercial registration is to do what we did was a phase 3B open label study where we could test the field effectiveness of the vaccine in South Africa amongst healthcare workers. So so that we worked with the regulators because we didn't know how to do this, whether it had to be a phase 3B study, whether it had to be under investigation or a review, or whether it could be a Section 21 or some other kind of intervention. But given the lack of international EUA, the best way to evaluate this product, given that also we didn't have commercial lots, was to do a phase 3B open label study. And that's why we did it in this manner after consultation with the regulatory authorities. I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, I think you answered the question very well. But I think from there, what came it was the operationalization of the study. I wanted to bring in Ms. Fatima and Ms. Jacqueline just to give us a brief overview of how the operationalization happened in such a fast pace.
Okay, thank you, Sacra, for having us. I think we're really excited to be part of the clinical research environment and how we worked on tirelessly. Listening to the previous discussion, I think a lot of what people said there was very true on Sisonke. So Sisonke, I think, kind of, means together. And if it wasn't for people literally coming together and making this happen, it wouldn't have worked.
So can I ask us to unmute?
When you ask about operationalization, I can't even say it now. Use existing Ensemble J&J sites. So they were experienced sites. They had the infrastructure. They had all the necessary equipment, and they had the staff. I think what we realized with Sisonke early on, there was a huge pharmacy burden. And in order to to make it operational, we actually we GCP trained a lot of pharmacists on how to actually fill syringes, and Jackie and I and some other people worked on a lot of training material, and it's something that we were really proud of because by in a couple of weeks we had videos, we had work practice guidelines, we had an online training module, you know, both practical and theoretical training. And I think even, you know, sometimes people know with clinical trials, even after months, you don't often have a lot of that support. So we were very proud of all the training we developed, you know, for that. I think we also, you know, had our various committees. There was our safety committee, we had our PSRTs, and, you know, we had Leonard supporting us to literally, you know, not only, and just a correction, it wasn't 80,000 vaccines, it was 500,000 vaccines that Leonard brought into the country, and how to, you know, get all the requirements. You know, we literally, I think, if it wasn't for a team effort, we wouldn't have done it. And I think the protocol team itself were very flexible and I think nimble. So we were able, I mean, we didn't sleep for weeks. We met every single night for 7 days a week. I'm not exaggerating. You know, we literally made decisions and made things work with this small team. But as what was said in the previous discussion, everybody wanted to help. You know, everybody wanted to offer something. On the ground, this was a collaboration with NDOH. And so we had our research teams on the ground, but we had, you know, we had a lot of volunteers sort of coming forward just to be a queue marshal or just to be part of this process. We had doctors, you know, checking voucher numbers. So we didn't have, I think it was amazing. It was a real pride. For me, there was no sort of egos involved. It was just everybody just made things work. And I think the sites, if it wasn't for the sites, you know, no one complained. Everybody just got down and did it. Yeah, Jackie, do you want to add anything on that?
Yeah, good afternoon and happy International Clinical Trials Day to everyone on. I think Fatima has covered it very well. So very key to this was leveraging our very experienced sites. They are the ones that conducted the study to show that this vaccine works, and they're used to conducting vaccine studies. So this was very, very key in getting the show on the road and operationalizing the study quite fast in, you know, and scaling up to 500,000 people in collaboration with the NDOH. So yeah.
Over to you, Dr. Sanet Aspinall. Thank you very much, Fatima and Jacqueline, for giving us that brief overview of the work that you have put together. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone online, and good afternoon to the panel members. I want to ask Professor Glenda Gray. I think it was incredibly innovative and creative to run this study as a phase 3B and a rollout of the J&J vaccine. So how did and how will South Africa benefit and the global science community from this large phase 3 Zonki trial? Because I believe that it's going to be a trial that is going to be a lot spoken about in future. And what are your views on what will the benefits of this big trial be?
So thanks very much. I think there are lots of benefits. So first of all, I don't think we've ever done such a big phase 3 operational research. You know, so you know, usually they're small. So enrolling almost 500,000 healthcare workers literally in 3 months into a program. You know, so I think in terms of how we can benefit is I think in terms of operations, you know, we can benefit the country, and already we benefited for whatever we learned and how to go to scale at the vaccination sites. We directly translated that into the national rollout. So from an operational point of view, we helped with processes, quality assurance, issues around managing pharmacovigilance and safety, set up a safety desk, and you know, so I think a lot of things that we learned can be directly translated into the national rollout, particularly around pharmacovigilance, managing safety, quality assurance. You know, we were worried about dosage, the quality of dosing, syringe fillers, and managing reactogenicity. So I think just the practical aspects of this trial helped with the national rollout, gave the country confidence to take something to scale. I think in terms of science, what we have is a real field effectiveness of SARS-CoV-2 vaccine trial. So we have an A26 vaccine that we know worked in the clinic, and now we're trying to establish it whether it worked in the field. And that in itself is going to be an extremely interesting evaluation, because there are lots of ways to when you talk to international epidemiologists and statisticians, everybody has their pet theory, a test negative case control, a step wedge design, a this and a that. And so we will be able to learn firsthand how to best evaluate a program based on the phase 3B open label study. And whatever we learn how to evaluate this, we'll be able to translate it to the Pfizer rollout that we have as well. So we'll be able to evaluate field effectiveness using a whole lot of different kind of parameters. We'll be able to evaluate breakthrough infections and to see what kind of pressure vaccination has on viral evolution. We'll be able to evaluate vaccine failure by making sure that we understand, who breaks through and why. And we'll also be able to evaluate both short-term and long-term durability, and whether, in fact, when we need boosts for the vaccine. What this vaccine trial also taught us is about the immune-based thrombosis, and our sub-studies. We'll be the first people in the world to look at coagulopathy in a sub-study. So, so we're going into a sub-study now where we'll be looking at the immunogenicity of this vaccine on HIV-infected people, the safety in pregnant women and lactating women, in people with comorbidities, as well as coagulation. So, so no one's done coagulation studies yet on this, and we'll be able to do that. So I think we'll be able to learn a lot. And I think what we also have learned is never say you can't do anything. So there's no such thing as no. You just have to find a solution, and that's what we really learned, was that anything is possible, and we will find the solution to any problem that comes up.
No, thank you. Do you think that the efficacy is going to be lower in this high-risk healthcare worker population than in the lower-risk communities population?
I don't know. I mean, I think we had pretty high risk people in the ensemble study, and I was just looking this afternoon about the placebo recipients. And if we look at the phase 1, if you look at the phase 3 study, the Sosonki, not Sosonki, the ensemble, and there were in say 20,000 placebo recipients, there were 300 breakthrough infections, and just under 100 in the active arm. And so I think we've got a nice basis to look at. And so if we look at the active and the active arm and placebo arm, and we look at our breakthrough infections over time, I think we're going to be able to really calibrate what field effectiveness look like. So I don't think it'll be as good as a phase 3 clinical trial when you have the best conditions. But I do think that we are going to be able to demonstrate effectiveness, and and I think what's more important is issues around durability. And we do realize these are healthcare workers; they're highly exposed, and they're going to bear the brunt. So we want to see how this vaccine works against highly exposed individuals in South Africa. And hopefully, maybe Linda Gall can say a little bit more about this. But hopefully, we've got various analyses to try and corroborate effectiveness, and there is no perfect statistical method that I'm aware of. We've been on lots of webinars, lots of discussions with CoVPN and WHO, and it's still undecided exactly how you evaluate it, except by looking at once you get to saturation of a population and you start to look at the number of cases that you have. But I think we're too early in the rollout to be able to fully evaluate the effectiveness. But it's an exciting place to be, because it's not clear cut like an RCT, where you have a control group, you have time on interventions, you have a nice clean instrument. Yeah, it's quite messy.
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. I want to ask Professor Linda Gale-Becker, you obviously had to put together with your operational team a Sazonki team of investigators. So what were the considerations to put together this team together for this phase 3B trial?
Sorry, I didn't hear the last of that question. Could you ask me that question again? Sorry, Sene.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I said you obviously were involved in putting together a team of investigators for the Sazonki trial. So what were the considerations for putting this team together of investigators for this phase 3B rollout study?
Yeah, so I think as Fatima and Jackie both hinted at, we built on the ensemble studies. So we already knew we had the A team. They had already delivered a phase 3 to FDA and Sacra standards in record time. And and so we literally took that A team and asked a small team that had enrolled 7,000 people and said to them, your next task is to enroll 500,000 people while you're unblinding the original study, mind you. And to their credit, every single one of them said, yes, we will do this. How should we go about it? And, as already has been mentioned, if they worked hard in ensemble, then they have worked, triply hard in Sazonki. It's meant weekends, late nights, many hours of work to get this done, and a whole lot of boldness and chutzpah whilst never giving up on their quality. So they have constantly maintained GCP and always been careful to ensure that SAPRA will be happy and the IRBs will be happy with our procedures, but they've got on and delivered in the most extraordinary way. So all kudos goes to the people on the ground.
That's incredible. And I want to ask about the informed consent, because obviously you couldn't have a large or a long informed consent as one normally has in a phase 3 study. So how did you navigate ethics, in terms of just using a shorter informed consent brochure and informed consent document?
Yeah, so we actually had an e-consent, which was linked into the EVDS. So it was intended to be a one-step sort of process, and I think it really was in the end. So this involved having a patient information leaflet that each individual could read at their leisure. They could also access it online, find it at site, etc. But then the consent itself was literally a page. And most of all, it checked key issues around what we all know is very important in informed consent. So it checked that people had picked up, had read the PIS, needed them to sort of answer a few understanding questions, and then took them directly to the signing of the consent, which could be done, on a device. And I think this is a breakthrough for clinical trials, and I think very, very important for this trial. We could not have done it without that opportunity to use that technology. So, kudos again to the regulators and the ethics boards for embracing that. I think it was very important to do so. And I think, again, showing an avenue of how perhaps we can do this kind of work going forward. But I want to again say that it was with understanding that there was lots of community engagement, making sure people understood and did have in fact informed consent. So I think that was never a shortcut that we took. I think it was still taken very seriously by the team. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Over to
and
you.
just to add that at the site there was additional support by the research site team in case there were questions, that were lingering after reading the consent form. There were people available to answer some of these questions. And in addition to the community engagement, we made information available on our websites through webinars, and if people wanted, they could have a paper copy of the same to carry home with and read later. And yeah, so yeah.
Good, good. Over to you, Becky. We can talk a little bit about safety and quality on the trial.
Yes, thank you very much. I really like to also just highlight the information that you shared about the quality of sites that participated in the ensemble study, because I did have a bit of time at site and I realized how much site work is. I think it's very important for us to acknowledge the work that is done by site, especially more people that are at a sponsor level or at the CRO level. I think the amount of work that happens at the research side, it's beyond, especially now with the COVID-19. It has actually created an opportunity for our site to step up when it comes to quality, when it comes to safety. So I just want to know, especially with the Sisonke study, how did you ensure that? But I mean, I had the first-hand experience. I can say that I got vaccinated and I went through the whole process. So I just want to say that maybe give us a brief overview of how you got to set up the quality, the planning and the safety management of the whole program.
Okay. Is that to me?
Yes, to you.
All right. So first of all, and we've already alluded to this, there was the issue of capacity to get, vaccines in healthcare workers' arms within a timeline of three months. And so we had to quickly scale up to remove the bottlenecks. And as Fatima mentioned, there were volunteers, but we also called on to the private and public sector pharmacists, even research doctors and nurses, and had to rapidly train them, SAGCP train them and training on the study before they could actually get to do anything like syringe filling or handling the vaccine. So that was one thing we had to do to ensure quality is maintained despite the pressure. And then we also obviously had a study pause, smack in the middle of the program. And, obviously safety needs to be assessed and due process followed before we could proceed. And meanwhile, we lost, 2 weeks there. And some of the shelf life of the refrigerated vaccines was compromised. And so unfortunately, we couldn't use those. And we followed the process to request the manufacturer whether this could be released from quarantine, and they could not. So obviously that was just another check and balance to make sure we're using viable vaccine. And then we also experienced technical challenges sometimes with the government's EVDS system, but we had a fallback plan where if the system is not working, you could use your paper informed consent forms and this and other forms to collect the patient data that we require to collect before anyone can get vaccinated. And then this information would get back captured onto the system. So we still had ways and means of getting the information we required to collect before vaccinating anyone. Obviously, we developed a protocol that already gives a minimum standard where you include your protocol items, and this was approved by the Reg Authority and the ethics committees. We've leveraged our sites. They're very experienced with vaccine studies, and were therefore able to rapidly take up the study. They're aware of the quality standards and metrics required within the clinical trial scope. Some of them are a bit OCD as well in terms of quality and participant safety. So they were very good at implementing their quality checks and balances, such as having a QC person to double check the vaccine and preparations and document everything. So this ensured accuracy as well. We also, so with the experience comes the ability to train people quickly, and we were able to do this given the short timeline and got things going. The protocol team and site operations teams have always been available to the PIs, the pharmacists, other organizations where there were questions or guidance being sought. And then we have also been in regular touch with the PIs with regular investigator meetings or calls. And we have also an experienced monitoring team that have helped with regulatory submissions, ethics submissions, and do actually do source document verification and regulatory review at the sites. And then in terms of safety, the study does have a safety team that does passive surveillance and performs a lot of active surveillance as well. So we have Dr. Simba and Azri Takalani, who are actually quite the sophisticated pharmacovigilantes. So they lead the Sisonke safety desk and that team, and they're key to another additional layer of safety review, which we call the protocol safety and review team, who arbitrate more complex cases. And there's also another layer of safety review by an independent safety monitoring committee composed of epidemiologists, infectious disease, and research experts. And then each healthcare worker is also counseled at vaccination on what to expect following vaccination in terms of reactogenicity. And they're also furnished with a flyer indicating the same, including the contact details for the safety desk in case of any symptoms of concern. They also receive an SMS from the EVDS system indicating that they should continue with their non-pharmaceutical interventions, and the same information as in the flyer on what to expect, as well as the safety desk or other reporting contacts. So Fatima or anyone else might be able to add on to this, but that's, yeah, in a nutshell, how we've been able to assure quality and safety as we go along.
Yeah.
And
So thank you
maybe
for
I
that.
would add, Sanette, that we've had something like 10,500 currently inputs to that safety desk so far, so, and counting every day. That was a few days ago, actually. So certainly people are using the opportunity to describe reactogenicity and so on.
Okay, so you believe that because it was self-reporting on the study, that there wasn't a risk of missing any safety data?
Well, we had different ways of collecting data. So we have active and passive. So the passive was the referral into the sites from the participants or their family. And there was also at the site, at the vaccination site, there were, if anything went wrong, there was active surveillance at the site level. And then we have a back check, so we can check the DATCOV database, NHLS and ICD database, death register, and hospitalization rate. So we are able to back check the safety. So we both have active and passive surveillance. And then also we can run checks on the national databases to make sure we haven't missed anything in terms of hospitalizations or deaths, or COVID infections.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Gray. I want to move over to Leonard now and ask him to share his experience in managing the cold chain in the delivery of vaccines. I think it was Fatima that said 500,000 doses have been delivered to the various sites. And Leonard, perhaps you can just talk to us about the benefit of BioCare being behind this and the different work that was done for Sisonke versus other trials and the logistics of your company that has been involved in this.
Thanks, Sanette. I apologize first for my camera being off. I'm busy juggling around with neck joints with the Pfizer rollout at the moment. So I'm in between calls. So my camera's up. So yeah, so when I got the call from Melinda Saturday evening, I think 5 p.m., saying we're going to do a project, I said, yeah, by all means, never knowing what the scope of the project is going to be. And when we got the scope of the project, a few days later, we had to, I think on the weekend and on a Saturday afternoon, I phoned the supplier in the UK, said I need all these -20 boxes. And we had all those supplies in place by Monday morning to start the first distribution as it came in. The complexity of the cold chain conditioning is of utmost importance for the integrity of the vaccines. To maintain that, so the packaging we've used was specially designed packaging that's used globally that will maintain that for 96 hours. Can even be used as a backup fridge freezer. We've seen it used in the Northern Cape when we ran into a problem for a few days, using that to actually maintain that temperature, monitored throughout this journey. And the process for conditioning of the packaging takes you about 3 days. So we've got to condition them in a certain facility, then decondition them, then prep them, and then obviously get them ready for distribution. So it was very important to actually make sure that process was streamlined. We ran a full 24-hour operation to make sure all that got out. So distribution actually took place every morning. Every distribution on the weekend took place around about from 2 p.m. We had people on the road, and distribution took place. And by 3 p.m. on the same day, all 9 provinces' vaccines were delivered safely under control, correct temperatures that we needed to do it. So going hand in hand in that was the top level security. As I said, I thank Glenda and Nigel Becker for giving me the opportunity, and Fatima for putting me onto the opportunity to actually do this. As I said, the scope of work when the weekend came, I thought, okay, we're just going to move 1 or 2 boxes for Glenda next week, that's fine. Never realized the scope of work and the amount of hours it's going to go into it. So it was really, really challenging and exciting. And as I said, to get that to the 9 provinces, I've accompanied it, but I also, on this platform, to celebrate International Clinical Trials Day, we must not forget the personnel involved in actually getting this study going on Sosongwe, which is all the province heads of SAPS, the South African Air Force, net joins, the generals that myself and Glenda sat on calls with to make the security possible, giving us the aircrafts that were needed to fly into the provinces. I was lucky enough to fly on most of those aircrafts, so was Jackie, to actually be on those aircrafts. And all these vaccines were transported with a custodian on board. So I had somebody from my management team accompanying these vaccines to their final distribution throughout its journey. And so that is, I think, the complexity of it. And we've learned a lot along the way. I've learned a lot from the scientific side of what's needed, the logistics side I've had, and I think the logistics side, Jackie and Fatima learned on very quickly as well. And we had to change things at the last minute. Jackie and Fatima and myself were getting calls late at night saying, okay, we need to change this tomorrow morning, we need to go here. And we made decisions at the spur of the moment that this is what we're going to do. So it was very flexible. I think the flexibility working around this Sosongwe team was great. The communication, the key thing was the communication that actually got us through this.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's incredible what has gone into, managing the cold chain on the study. I want to move over now to Prof. Glenda Gray again and ask her her view at the moment on the 14th of April when the J&J rollout was suspended. So what went through your mind at that point in time?
I think Linda Gale and I were on a call together, and we were, I was on a call, and as we were on the call, I heard that the CDC and the FDA had paused this, and I was communicating with Linda Gale and also communicating with the minister about this, so that he would be aware, and we also gave the heads up to Sacra. And so it was terrible because we were going full steam ahead. We wanted to finish the trial by the end of April. We had unblinding to do. We wanted to get back to our day jobs. The teams were full throttle, and it was lunchtime on the Wednesday. And and I guess the whole of the afternoon we were making contingency plans, and the SAPRA and the ethics committees and the minister concurred that we should pause the study and look at the data. And straight at that stage, we got on to, we were working with the regulators. We had hours, in the evenings we were having hours-long calls with them, and looking at our data, reviewing our data, sharing our data with them, with the MAC, with everybody. So I think it was we lost over 4,500 vials, because obviously we had to pause, so there was wastage. So so we're still counting it, but around, am I right, Fatima, about 4,500 vials got wasted because we couldn't vaccinate that week. So there's always a tragedy about that. And we worked tirelessly. So after that, every 24 hours we were rewriting protocols, and we spent many nights rewriting protocols, doing the informed consent, and working with Sacra to get the study open again. And it was a long haul. And I think at some stage we were just going to throw in the towel. We thought, okay, it's not too shabby. We've done 300,000. What did we say? 350,000 healthcare workers. Let's just throw in the towel. We've done our job. Let's just pack it up. And that's how we felt at some of the stages. But I think that when someone wants to throw in the towel, then another person says, no, we can't throw in the towel. And so that's the good thing about it is a wonderful team, and a very special team of investigators and sites. And when we called the sites and we had we asked the sites, are you guys ready to go? And they said, we can't wait to get back into the field. We want to go out there and vaccinate the healthcare workers. And so they really spurred us on, because there were a lot of times when we actually felt like we're done, and the guys in the field said, no, we want to go back. We want to go and vaccinate. We can't wait to get back into the sites, and so they really, it was a wonderful team, and those investigators are just, we flogged them, and they just basically got up and went back to the site. So I think it's just what we have learned is the value of a team, and the value of working together, and trying to make things work. So it was very traumatic having the study paused. Also, when we got back into the field, there was a lot of vaccine hesitancy, and we really had to work hard to overcome the vaccine hesitancy, which we did, because as you saw the last week, we had mobs at the sites. We had to call in the police. We had to close the gates, and so what we did demonstrate was that that people needed and wanted the vaccine. Over.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I think that's why we're here today, to basically honor all the heroes in the study. It's been just incredible. You've touched on vaccine hesitancy. So you believe that there was a bit of vaccine hesitancy, or was it just complacency?
There was hesitancy. You pause a study for 2 weeks, and then you open it up, and people are suspicious, and they're worried, and they're nervous, and you have to build confidence again, and we take safety very, very seriously. Every adverse event, every breakthrough infection, every hospitalization affects the team greatly. We have a sick workforce. The health worker is sick in this country, and we did not appreciate how ill the healthcare worker is in South Africa. Their comorbidities, their diabetes, their hypertension, they're sick, and we didn't appreciate exactly how sick our workforce was. So we learned a lot as well about the workforce in South Africa. So I think it's, I think we've learned a lot about, we've also learned a lot about what we don't know. We don't know the prevalence of DVTs. We don't know the prevalence of pulmonary embolus. We don't know the profile of clotting disorders in our country. There's so little background, so we don't know whether we are the same as the background prevalence, whether we're higher, we're lower. We don't have age-related data on stroke, or so there's a lot of missing stuff in the country, and we need to accumulate that data going forward.
Yeah, sure.
Sanette,
Okay.
there was one other tragedy casualty of this was, and I know Sacra cares about this a lot, is pregnant women and breastfeeding women. So unfortunately, in the midst of the safety deliberation, although we were applying to involve pregnant healthcare workers in, as we believe was very important, in Sisonke, there was a decision taken at that point that we should perhaps delay the involvement of pregnant women. And so we had to go back with an amendment which delayed it, but we have put doses aside and we do have permission to offer vaccination to those women. But I know a number of women, you know, missed the opportunity, have gone on to deliver and so on. And that, I think, does also raise the issue that our thinking around the involvement of pregnant women for their own benefit and for the good of public health is something that I think we still need to develop in the country. I know that there were good reasons, you know, etc. at the time, but I think that certainly was something we as a team felt very dismayed about.
Okay, no, thank you very much for that. Vicky, over to you, maybe for the last two questions, and then I can end the session because I think we're almost done.
Yes, thank you very much. And touching on the perspective of women, it's very, I'm very proud to be sitting in the capacity of great women today that will had spent sleepless nights to put together for this to work. I mean, we have a question for you now with the government rollout that have started. How involved are you, and what kind of open platforms do you have access to actually contribute to the government strategy? At Prof. Glenda Gray. I think you muted.
Yes, sorry. So we've, you know, basically we've supported a lot of our sites became rollout sites. So I think we supported in there, and we supported them in the processes. So getting the electronic vaccine data system working, the online registration, training the vaccinators, training them on quality assurance, and about some of the stuff that we did. They implemented, like our strategy around filling doses. So you know, some of the sites have adopted the way with our vaccine filler processes. Instead of having the vaccine filled at the vaccination site, you know, we do it centrally for everybody. So some of those practices have been implemented at the site, and flows, you know, so about, you know, rapid process improvements, managing flows, you know, the kind of the innovation, the green chairs, the yellow chairs, the areas, you know, so a lot of the practical stuff has helped, and plus some of the pharmacovigilance, some of the safety support, and some of the, you know, the data around breakthrough infections and managing the back. You know, so there's a lot of stuff that we were able to transfer to the rollout, both at a site level and also how to support safety and evaluate breakthrough infections.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And now we are faced with the third wave, and through Sisonke, we managed to vaccinate about 500,000 of healthcare workers. I think that the other big question in our mind as researchers is when will some preliminary results be available to compare the vaccinated and unvaccinated healthcare worker? So I don't know if maybe the Green, you can speak to that.
Yeah, I think as mentioned, you know, we obviously we're having those discussions now. We're just cleaning the data. We've had a first look at our data this week, cleaning it all, and then, you know, finding the best way to evaluate the effectiveness. And so that is ongoing. And then when is the time limit? Do we evaluate it 3 months after the last jab, or do we censor people? So there's there'll be a lot of preliminary analyses, but I guess the final database will be once with 3 months after the last jab. But in the meantime, we will be cleaning the database, evaluating the breakthrough infections, and discussing at a global level how to best interpret field effectiveness.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to you, Dr. Aspinall.
Yeah, so I think being International Clinical Trials Day today, as the president of the South African Medical Research Council, what is your message today to the South African clinical trial research professional fraternity regarding their contribution to research and development of vaccines and of medical treatment in the country?
I'd say that South Africa is open for business. We have a vibrant and talented clinical trial infrastructure and laboratory support infrastructure. And this country is a jewel when it comes to clinical trials and the laboratory support of clinical trials, both in the academic sector and in the private sector. So, we've worked in the academic sector mostly, and we've had the opportunity now with Ensemble and Sasonki to interface with the private clinical trial industry. And I think that both, we've added value to both. I think they've taught us and we've taught them. But be in the private or the public sector, we have a wonderful regulatory authority, a very responsive regulatory authority. We have wonderful ethics committees that support the program and just, wonderful ethics and regulatory support, as well as very talented clinical researchers in this country and wonderful laboratory scientists who support the clinical research. So South Africa is open for business and very talented clinical trialists, and just wonderful to see them thrive in COVID.
Thank you. That's very encouraging. Thank you very much. I think it's time to close this session. So we've seen a lot today. Even in the previous session, we've seen today the impossible is not impossible. And as a country, we've done a huge amount to work our way through this pandemic, as we also see now with Ensemble and Sazonki. And I'm sure for many of us, we're going to talk about this big trial. And I'm going to be very keen to watch the results of this trial. So many thanks to all the panel members from the Sazonki team for your wisdom and your insight this afternoon. And thank you for all of us who stayed on being online and with us during this session. We really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much. That was
You
our
make us want
surprise.
That was so sweet.
Thank you for and for every work that was done just to get to where we are today. I don't know what's happening with my camera, but I mean, you've worked endlessly. I mean, every research site, everyone has never rested ever since COVID stepped into our doors. Our bags are tired, but we keep on working hard. I think we should not forget the emotional aspect that goes behind everything that we do, just to keep going. You know, the sleeping tablets that we sometimes take, just to at least get that 5-hour good sleep, you know, so that you can wake up and write another protocol, and you can wake up and answer another question, and to stay above the ground. I think it goes not just to the Sisonke team, it goes to everyone that is working in the research space in South Africa. So from me as the Sacra chairperson, we saw it fit for us to go beyond and extend ourselves. And I would like to thank Barbara. Precious, I'll come to you now, but I would just want to thank Barbara and the team. We actually acquired like a new team that has been helping us just to function and to plan this and to prepare this. I mean, I think it was a great effort that Barbara put together. And for everyone that raised their hand, I think our panel was bigger than, I don't know, everybody was just willing to come and contribute. I'm very much thankful for the support to Sacra. So keep supporting Sacra. To all the people in the industry, we need an organization like Sacra. We need to be able to coordinate and work to showcase how big is South Africa. We need to collaborate even more. So our new motto is that it's more about collaboration than competition. So if there's an organization such as Sacra that can be able to bring us together in an event like this, and not just events, but do even more for the industry. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I can talk the whole day, and I hand over to Precious. Thank you, Precious, for hosting us.
No, definitely. That video just gave me such good bumps, Becky. Well done to the team that put it together. And what I just want to reiterate that the key messaging there, that as today we celebrate International Clinical Trials Day, we are celebrating you guys, the heroes that have made sure and have pushed boundaries beyond sometimes I think humanly possible. Prof. Linda Gil-Becker, against a lot of resistance, and it does give us a lot of comfort, especially as young investigators and as young people involved in clinical research, that we do indeed stand in the shoulders of very strong men and women. But beyond that, I do hope that at the end of this, we still are going to continue celebrating International Clinical Trials Day. The day has not ended. So until it hits midnight, we still need to be celebrating in our corners. But a very, very, very big well done. The struggle's not over yet until we've reached herd immunity and until we at least have adapted to our new normal. The work still continues, but we just wanted to celebrate you and thank you for coming through to share your experiences as well, because in collaboration and in the coming together, we're able to learn from each other as well. So big thank you, and thank you for taking the time. I know we're all very busy, so we do definitely appreciate you giving us your time. To the bigger Sacra team, thank you guys for putting together such an amazing event today. I know Becky, Barbara, Dr. Aspinall, there's been a lot of back and forth, but you guys did such an amazing job. Leonard, so thank you. So from me, let us continue celebrating. The future only looks brighter. We have proven what we're capable of as South Africa, and the world has had to take notice. Right. So let us continue. Let us not be disheartened, and have a very beautiful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vicky, can you play the video again as we log out? Can you please play the video?
Okay, we'll do
We
that.
want some more tears and some more celebration and salutation to you all. You deserve it all.
Thank you.
Muted.